Good afternoon, everyone. This is Chip Knight, Alpine Development Director here in the COE in Park City. We're having a couple of IT issues on our end. Apologies for being a couple minutes late. If you can hear me, could someone type in the chat window, please? Perfect. John Norton, you win. Thanks, man. Well, welcome everyone. This is our second webinar of the year. We did one after the men's development camp in Squaw Valley in Mammoth, California, and we recently had a larger scale project in Mt Hood, and it was both men's development head coach Sasha Rierick, women's development head coach Marianne Chernigoy, and as well as a bunch of U16 athletes who were at this project. We had 47 athletes in total. We had 18 staff. It was a great combined collaborative effort. Big thanks to Timberline for their support. We had the run-of-the-mill on the far west lanes, top to bottom. We were able to set a tremendous number of gates, as all the coaches can attest. There was a lot of work being done, setting gates, and we had about 700 slalom turns on the hill at one time. So athletes were getting well over 1,000 turns a day. They were making basically 2 laps through each of the 4 lanes. It was a sight to see for sure. So I'm here today with Sasha Rierick and Marianne Chernigoy in the COE. We've got a PowerPoint ready to go, which I'll queue up for you here. And then we've got some videos that we'd like to share as well. And bear with us, we're going to toggle back and forth between the PowerPoint and the videos. So it's a little bit of a juggling act. We'll do the best we can here. So again, can you guys see the PowerPoint on my screen? Could someone type in the chat bar? Perfect. Wow. All right. Well, again, psyched to report on this recent project in Mt Hood. This is a snapshot of the athletes and staff who were there. As you can see, a large group, 47 athletes, 7 years of birth. Everyone from top level D team, named deep team athletes to rising first year U16, so athletes who were U14s last year. A great effort, broad spectrum of athletes. And I also want to mention the staff. We had 18 staff, a bunch of US ski and snowboard staff, myself, Sasha, Marianne, as I mentioned, also Darlene Nolting, Bill Gunnish, regional directors, Kathy Okanewski, Eastern Region Youth Coach, Brad Farrell, Eastern Region Coach. We had 2 DSIA staff, Sean Woman and Sue Kramer. They were huge assets, as you'll see in a few minutes, to what we were trying to achieve. And then we had a great set of club coaches, and club coaches are really integral to this effort as we try to not only impact the elite level development athletes, but also the national development group athletes, and wrap coaches education for the club coaches who can then take the best practices and the information they've gleaned back to the club level and impact development broader than we can nationally. So really want to give a big shout out to Ben, John Cashman, Sylvan Kaufman, Garrett Lasher, Christina Ravello, Jeff Serjane, Nick Stenica, Dan Strip, and Brad Wall, who worked their tails off and were instrumental in this effort. Thank you guys very much. I'm going to turn it over here to Sasha Rierick and Marianne for some more specifics on the goals of the camp. And this will be a bit of a tag team effort as we go along.
Okay, so the camp goals, we're really working on the fundamentals. Fundamentals that, we're going to revisit pretty much at every camp. The extent is going to be decided, the content of the camps, but pretty much where we have to return and revisit at every single project on snow. Our goals of the camps were broken down onto the technical, tactical, cultural, and conditioning goals. Going to the technical first, we want to have one thing that was actually a theme of this camp, and it's going to be theme of the next camps is a balanced athletic stance through the whole turn. When you're talking about a athletic stance, you can speak about only maybe one time in a transition, but we really want to make sure that we emphasize the balanced athletic stance throughout the turn. Transition, initiation, pressure over the fall line, and also at the completion phase. The second goal was lower leg engagement. We really want to emphasize what does really start the turn top, when you start coming out of the transition, how does this really technically happen? The third goal on the technical side was a pole plant. Emphasizing the pole plant, especially in a slalom, it is very important component of the technical fundamentals and something that we're going to revisit and make an emphasis at every single camp. Fourth technical goal of the camp was decisive, active weight transfer. Also, outside ski to outside ski. This is where we wanted to really emphasize independent work of the legs, from the pressure from the outside to the outside, both again in slalom and giant slalom environment. The fifth, the last technical goal that we had for this camp was the upper body discipline and also upper lower body separation at the same time. The upper body meaning the hips to shoulders, and lower body meaning everything under the hips, so the legs. There's a lot to talk about there. Especially important is in the slalom event. Then we had the tactical goals of the camp. We included here 3: the pressure in the fall line. Sasha was very heavy on the walk concept of the pressure in the fall line, which we accomplished daily in a different environment with a blue dye or with the brushes on the side of the turn. Second of the tactical points was adaptability that points to the turn shape and the turn tempo under the conditions. Turn shape pretty much meaning the open or straight and turning. Tempo to the short sets or longer sets, distances between the gates, and the conditions meaning in a different environment. We had a pretty good snow surface almost through the entire camp. We worked to the rolls, we worked to the spine. During the day when the sun warmed up the snow, we also developed ruts in order to test out also the athletes' balance in those conditions. So a lot of those components were there on a daily basis. During the camp, we then also added the third component or third tactical goal, and that is releasing the skis down the hill. Basically, myself on the women's side, I saw that happening on the eastern side of the Palmer Glacier, where we went for the rhythmical GS course, a little bit steep on that side, and you could see very quickly that the athletes wanted to overturn at the bottom of the course, at the bottom of a turn, and so we started to pay more attention to that as well. So besides technical, tactical, we had 2 other goals. Cultural. This is where Sasha, his animation helped a lot throughout the camp on a daily basis, where we had all the athletes and coaches together, trying to light the fire for hard work on the fundamentals. I mentioned this a little bit at the beginning of the presentation, but really trying to get everybody excited to this area of one of the most important things we can do, on a development level. And lastly, under the goals, with some conditioning goals, and that was to do some core education on the field daily in the afternoon, and subsequent to that, also the full body connective strength exercises. So something that the athletes could all walk away from the camp with some new learned exercises that would help them out at the home conditioning.
Thanks, Marian. Turn it over to Sasha Rearick now. And just as an aside, if anyone has any questions as we go along, feel free to type them in the chat window, and we'll address them when we can a little bit later.
The main focus of this camp was to provide a different content, a different stimulus to the athletes, to really focus on the fundamentals, as Marian so well stated. We used 3 different types of environments, just as we did in Mammoth and Squaw: formal ski instruction, teaching of certain skills, and the skills that we were most wanting to improve on was this concept of establishing the platform with the lower leg engagement. It's the femur actually rotating or internally rotating inside the pelvis. And the reason we wanted to do that from a formal teaching point of view is because we see that athletes establish their platform or start to increase edge angle by bringing the hip in or inclinating in, and therefore it limits them to have adaptability. So that skill of learning that, we feel it needs to be taught in a formal ski instruction method. Then we went through constraint-based courses. I will give a lot of examples of the constraint-based courses. This is, again, pulling on the science that shows that if the athletes are exposed to different environments and have to self-explore how to get through them, they have greater long-term learning, which is they are able to pull up in performing. So they can perform on-demand skills they have learned. We gave them tasks such as being balanced, put the pressure on the fall line, and we gave them cues. But really a lot of it was just skiing through the types of courses. I call it course setting of obstacles because we used brushes, hair, stubbies, long gates, panel gates that we would cross block, etc. We had nice rolls built and a spine. Unfortunately, the spine was a little bit short, but the spine was actually very well built, one of the best ones I've seen. And using the west side there, we were able to have some steep, moderate, and flat sections. We also always did normal rhythm and timing courses so that the athletes could then take what they are learning in the constraint basis and try to feel it in a more normal situation. That was the goal of the, on the men's side, based on the amount of athletes we had. We didn't quite get to the 30% ski instructing model that we had in Squaw Valley. That was due a little bit to the number of athletes, but also Hood is a tough place to do that, and I would change up in the future how we do that, making a section of the hill actually be skill-based learning by instruction. The formal ski instructing also focused on balanced athletic stance, lower leg engagement, which is the internal rotation, to establish that platform. We also added in ankle work. Sean Warman did ankle pronation work with the athletes in dry land and on the hill to try to feel the edge, to find that platform and balance. I'm going to show a little video of kind of the stuff that he was doing so you all can see get a sense of it.
Internal leg rotation, what muscles we were using, and then clarified what leg and what part of the turn we were focusing on. You don't have to do anything here. This should be stable. Now, for the sake of resistance, just should add a little more. Engage the ankle first. I want to see that ankle engaged, then use the leg. Now pull that bend. There we go. Engage that ankle and make the leg work.
Notice in the video his hip is not moving while that motion is happening. And if we have true upper and lower body separation and upper body stability, that motion occurs for our leg. So that was what we're trying to get to there. The upper and lower body separation was probably the most confrontation we had or challenged to get across to some of the athletes and some of the coaches. I think there's been a real firm belief that we need to be parallel to the skis for a long time. And at the World Cup level, what we've noticed for the past years is that in order to ski technical turns, you have to have upper and lower body separation. To maintain balance, you have to have that upper and lower body separation. In order to move out of the turns dynamically, coming out of the apex, you have to have that separation. In order to make quick slalom turns and maintain balance, you need that upper and lower body separation. So it took some time. It took a few days to kind of get that concept. But as athletes watched video and felt when they were keeping the hips stable, mainly facing down the hill more, they found that they were able to ski a lot quicker and more balanced. We also did some formal coaching drills in the afternoons. This worked quite well. On certain days, the hill cleared out and we were able to take 5-6 runs quite quickly. We focused on the stacking drill, formerly known as something else. Those of you that have asked me to change the name, I've done that. It's now the stacking drill. Why? Because you get yourself stacked up over your skis. And we've also used the Avers drill, which really focuses on the movement from apex to apex. In there's a picture of Pat Coughlin doing the Avers drill. We did both of these drills in slalom and GS radiuses. We did it with linked outside ski turns with a hop in between. We also did it with the reverse bicycles. The reverse bicycles is where you pick the tip of the outside ski up at the end of the turn, but you leave the tail in the snow. Without talking about it, it's trying to get the athletes to release the ski down the hill, but also help them learn to ski the ski tip to tail eventually. The constraint-based environments in slalom, we had everything from 0.57 meters brushes to 18-meter slalom. Here's some of the examples that we had through the period of 5 days of slalom training. 6 days of slalom training, excuse me. In addition to this, we did 1 day of 100-gate slalom. It was kind of the red letter day. And that was just to emphasize the ability to stay focused and balanced over the long course. What we saw was athletes got very nervous and worried about it and didn't know how to approach it. But through 3 runs of it, they started to figure out that they could ski normal, and they just had to keep their hip in a good balanced position over their feet. We most of the time did 20-gate sections, and the main reason for that is there's very little lactate load that occurs at a 20-gate course. Therefore, the athletes are able to take many more runs, and the gate count can get much higher. I'm going to go to some videos. I'm going to run through these pretty quick. I may skip a few. I tried to give examples of everything we've done. This is just basic hop turns. You can see this athlete is using both poles to push off the ground. Eventually, we got them to not push off the ground, but still have a pole plant. This was the contrast to that. Straight turning, open, slalom, stubby. Goal was to carve everything clean. We did a lot of hop turns, and basically here we can see that the athlete's a little bit back.
Good giraffe.
And we wanted to get him much more balanced, so he had absolute control. Through the camp, the one thing that we saw, especially throughout the camp, is that the hips became in a better athletic position. This was 3-meter stubbies, letting the rut build up, keeping the skis on the snow, good pole plants. We used the spine and terrain. The first days we just free skied through it, so that the athletes got the feeling of what it was going to feel like. I don't have video of the free skiing through the rolls because it was awful this day, but by the end you'll see some where the athletes are skiing rolls, slalom, hairpins, doing quite well. This is just a variation. You see Ben not quite focused to the bottom of the hill there. We need to keep working on that. Here's the same drill, different athletes. You can see that the hips are slightly more back. Therefore, the athlete can't move as quick and dynamically as he wants to. We're opening the stubbies up. Now it's about 6 meters. This is very tight. It's very tight. The athlete has to work hard to ski. Sorry for the wind noise in the background. Just giving you a little taste of what we experienced for a few days in Hood. But here you can see at the end of that run, the athlete has less rotation. You can see at the beginning of the run, a lot of rotation. This is what we saw quite a bit of. We really wanted to get to a place where there's more upper and lower body separation. You see the last couple of turns, he's able to link it a little bit better. We progressed it. Here's one of our U16s. Doing hop turns then to outside ski to outside ski. Again, we see in the back seat. And what I mean by hips over their feet is at this point in the turn, we want a hip right here at the apex. And we're seeing too much of this back here. Balanced athletic stance, the simple definition of that is the athlete can move in any way he or she wants at any time, quickly. Hips over the feet, we want to see. Here's again, tourney stubbies. You see, this athlete here was at the camp, the first camp, and did a lot of this, and has improved greatly with the upper and lower body separation. We contrast always the opposite direction. So this is 18-meter slalom, turning, through some rolls. I was impressed. For the most part, this was an area that the athletes did well on, better than expected. We didn't see as much leaning in as I expected, which was nice to see. I think that is due to the good work that's being done with upper body discipline across the country. Here's another example of that. This is slalom through rolls. We started out very easy through the rolls, setting 12 meters, and every day we brought it in 1 meter. So it became quicker and quicker and quicker. So it became tougher and tougher to maintain snow contact. We progressed quickly into one speed skiing in the gates. First it was in stubbies with poles. I noticed that all the athletes actually do a pretty decent job pole playing in this situation. We also set normal slalom, but very tight and turning. This is like 8 meters, but really across the hill. So it looks awful. I use this as an example because if this athlete would be pole planning, the rhythm and timing would be a lot easier. This athlete pole plants very well free skiing and in stubbies, but as soon as we put the tall gates in the ground, the pole plants go away, which was a very common theme we saw across everybody in the camp. Another example of outside ski hop turns. You can see the internal rotation of the femur. And the goal there is to catch the edge clean. And if he's in balance, he can jump off. Decent job there. Nice job. We also use panel slalom. Panel slalom is really good for getting the hip over the outside ski at the apex of the turn. You have to bring the hip deep against the wall. This is 12-meter panel slalom through rolls. We did it on easy sections and steeper sections. Here's one of our main D-team athletes. We're using this as an example of what we see as a very bad habit to get rid of, the rotation. Right here, if you had more upper and lower body separation, you'd be able to maintain balance and pressure in a better way. He does a pretty good job on his right. Oh, not so good. He finds the ski early, does a lot of good things, but the middle of the turn doesn't have the power it needs because of that rotation. This is something he's been working on really dramatically this year, but it's something that if we can coach at a younger age, we are going to be in better balance throughout our runs. And in order to ski aggressive, that must be instinctual. One of the ways we tried to help with this issue is double blocking panel gates. We saw athletes getting up to a better hip position by double blocking the gates. I do this brush drill a lot. Looking to go outside ski to outside ski, good upper lower body separation, and focus. Same thing on one ski. You can see the lower legs engaged, his hips over his foot. We also said very straight. This is set about 8 meters, very, very straight. And this is a decent example, but what we see is what we really want to see is the active weight transfer from this foot to this foot as soon as possible. There should be weight fully transferred from here to here at this point. And we can see it occurs there. So the pressure builds down here instead. But he does a lot of fundamentals, other fundamentals well in this run. He keeps his upper body stable, he's in decent balance. But these are some examples of the different constraint courses that we did. I'm going to skip ahead here since I've probably seen too much. One of the things that we did was mix the tempos so that the athletes had greater adaptability. I would say this was a goal of the camp. I would say we weren't as successful as I would have liked to have been here. I think we needed more base work done prior to really being able to take the effect of this out of the training. But from that example to this is 14 meter into 9 meter. I'm sorry, 8 meter. 14 to 8. 14 meters, and then 9 meters again. And then again. So we're working on that adaptability component of changing up the tempo and the turn radius. If you all can build a spine at home in terms of teaching snow content, I've not been fortunate enough to get a nice spine like that, in most of my coaching career, but that was really nice effect. We always did even rhythm courses to try to get that feeling of normal slalom, but we typically did. And you can see even rhythm fundamentals are getting there, but there's still no pole tap. In a course like this, we should at least have a pole tap where we can push and go and have that rhythm tap. Here's some of the U16s. This is running turning 12 meters. As it breaks down, you can see again that rotation. Really, really want to keep this stable facing down the hill so that we can be balanced and powerful on the outside ski. Our U16s ran all the same courses as everybody. I think one of the big advantages for them was they got to see a groove of what they're going to expect in the future. For finding speed, that's a big advantage. So I really want to drive home this rotation below body separation. Another video on there. You can see it. It's going to be a lot of work to get rid of this. He's done a good job in GS, but in slalom, it's still a struggle. Last clip. Lower body separation. That's the message. It's effective. We did do the ladies. Martin.
Just let me jump in here. I'm getting messages that everyone is having a little trouble with the video on the other end. Apologies, there's not much we can do, I'm afraid, on this end. It's some sort of a bandwidth issue. I'm hoping that if you just bear with us and listen, you'll get some good information, and that the recording we share will hopefully have some better video quality on that side. So here's Marianne now.
Just have actually two videos here of two development girls. Sasha pretty much walked through all the phases and with the emphasis on things that we worked on a daily basis in a different environment. Here's Keely in rhythmical slalom. In our case, on the women's side, one of the best in the stance with a high hip position, which I really like, especially this picture. Whoever sees it, it's in quite a really good balance position with the upper body, everything facing into the hill, skis pointing into the fall line, outside leg, and so forward. What I saw with this particular athlete a little bit on the left footers, you see some asymmetrical stuff from the previous turn, a little bit earlier going in with the upper body into the turn, and also slight rotation with the left side on the left footed turns. Again, better on side. There's some issues we got to work on this side. So that's one over there. Then I believe there's one more here. No, that's back to GS. We need this one for the GS side.
So, I mean, that's a kind of the gist of all the different kind of variety we threw at the athletes where they had to adapt. We had 122 different variations of courses on the hill over the days. GS, we did. You got that, GS?
Sure.
Yeah. I'll turn over to Marian for GS.
Sasha mentioned earlier the opening statements. We had 6 days of slalom and 2 days of GS. The reason mainly was that there was not that much snow on Mt Hood Palmer Glacier this time of the year, so we did more emphasis on the slalom and only 2 days on GS. Personally, I really wish we get another day in, because usually the sequence or progression of the 3 days, you see the one of the best gains on a third day. But nevertheless, the environment we worked in was pretty much similar to slalom. We used all the terrain features we did in slalom, but we started with the constrained courses in GS, 14 to 18 meters, through level ground, through the spine, through the rolls at the bottom. So we tried to set short sections everywhere we could. There really wasn't enough snow to set more than 12 to 14 gates consecutively, but we used a lot of sections. Then we did the rhythm 25-meter GS. For that, we moved over to the eastern side of the snowfield, and that day we were there 2 days. That provided us with a great level ground, good snow conditions, and we were able to set about, I believe, around 28 rhythmical GS gates with distance at about 25, 26 meters. On GS, we worked a lot on a wall on the outside of the turn. I mentioned that earlier, either with the paint or with the brushes, representing the point of where we should not cross and where we should try to bring the skiing deeper into the turn, deeper into the wall. And what was really beneficial, actually, to me to see with the girls I work with was the giant slalom, different course sets in the rolls. As soon as we have exposed the athletes to a different elements, so spine, the rolls, or there were the rods development, different issue would come up. And actually that kind of emphasized all the time how the fundamentals are really important when the elements get tougher. So in the rolls, the first, like Sasha said, the first couple of turns or skiing through the rolls was not ideal whatsoever. It didn't look that pretty. The girls did not incorporate the flexion and extension of the body together with the pressure and release well. But with consistently coming around and practice that more, that got better to the extent where it really looked good by the second day. So those were great environments to practice on everything we tried to accomplish. And the last thing we tried also in the GS courses was to run all the exercises, drills, sections with no poles. That was another element that added to difficulty of the execution, but very valuable. We could see that the balance was there or wasn't there, and the different issues again came out of that with no poles. And more than we went into the ruddy courses and more than we went into the rolls, more those issues again came out. I got a couple of videos from the girls on a GS site. I mean, just to, for you to see. So this is a 25-meter set rhythmical course.
Copy, I won't grab anything off the top.
This was the first day. let's go through, for the ones who sees the video well, just go maybe through a couple of things, through the different phases of the turn. If you remember earlier, what we really wanted to accomplish was athletic stance. This was one thing, top of our list of what needs to be throughout a turn. So we pay attention a lot to that. Rolling of the outside ski in with the knee. So internal roll of the femur, which you can see really well here. Now, in a fall line, good level shoulders there, good supported with the upper body, great balance of that. Maybe a little bit compressed, but overall, quite a great position. Other thing, if you remember from the beginning, outside ski to outside ski, really accomplish. This picture kind of represents my goals actually for the next camp in Saas-Fee in few weeks, where there's going to be a lot of GS and a little bit less of slalom. At the transfer phase and starting of the turn, the biggest danger, like Sasha said earlier, that we lean into the turn a little bit too early. And with that, we limit ourselves what's possible to do with the outside leg, how to start the turn, move the skis onto the edges, and get the initial direction change. So we're going to spend a lot of time of how to keep center of mass a little bit longer over the support and stay in balance at the top. Very important in order to get the outside knee rolled in and start the pressure at the top of a turn. The other thing is that we touched just a little bit at the camp. This came as we went during the days. And Sasha mentioned earlier, skiing deeper into the turn. Here actually is really well seen that, she has started the turn too early. What needs to slide to get to the apex of the turn, release the edges a little bit, and get onto the edges one more time. So that turn definitely was not clean, was not used to get that energy out of the turn. And you can see also actually on the exit of the turn, the outside ski was still not in a good position or with not a good pressure in the completion of that turn. So that's going to be an area we're going to put a lot of emphasis on right at the top of a turn. I just want to show one more footage, and this is where we just got a little bit of bump on the course, and just what the little bump does to the skier when the balance is not good. We already see that again, the skis were redirected too early into the turn, so we would like to see the line going deeper towards the apex of the turn. So also the upper body a little bit too far inside, the pressure, it's moved more over to the boat skis or more towards the inside ski, with a little bump coming onto that part of the turn. It throws the skiers out even more. So, everything what I said earlier with bringing in the different elements, different difficulties of the conditions, rolls, spine, whatever. If you're not in a perfect balance, the execution of the turns are not perfect, cannot be done in a good athletic stance, and it's hard to get the speed out of those turns. So these are the kind of the points that we touched in GS.
Thanks, Marian. Hopefully you could see the video a little better as he was pausing it. Again, apologies for the bandwidth issue. Turn it over to Sasha here.
So kind of lessons learned, having so many different athletes from across the country is a great opportunity for us to learn in different ways. One of the, like I've touched base already on, is this concept of upper and lower. and there seems to be confusion around what is understood and what is needed. For sure, there are times when having the hips and the shoulders aligned with the skis is faster. There's no doubt. But that's at times. And at times, you need to have that upper and lower body separation. I think part of the confusion is caused also by sometimes we have athletes that over counter at the top of the turn. So to counter that, we say keep your hips with the skis. They're really different points. The upper and lower body separation is really from the apex through the completion of the turn. If you have any questions on this, let's discuss it as a group or type them in and we can talk about them on the end of this webinar. What I did see was with kind of the middle level to upper level guys, as soon as we started really talking about active weight transfer, guys, come on, move from one foot to the other actively. We saw them all of a sudden able to perform the turns with much more athleticism, in a much more athletic stance. And it was the concept of just actively going to find that new outside ski. Whether it was at the completion of the turn, in the transition, or right at the top of the turn. As long as they were really decisively active to find that outside ski, we saw the skiing improve dramatically. I saw the same thing happen in Squaw Valley when we were brought that concept in. So I think that's something that we need to bring into our vocabulary across the country. The ability to have those independent feet to go from one ski to another. Drills that seem to help that a lot are the shuffle drill where you make an obstacle course on the flats and you have to step over the obstacles. Skating, tremendous for that. Skating uphill, skating downhill. Those kind of exercises, drills, I think are really good for creating that active weight transfer. As we've been talking about, the hips over the feet, that high hip position. We saw good progress with this, but we still have a huge amount of work to do, even with the top guys. The hip position at the apex needs to be in a strong, powerful position to handle the forces, redirect that momentum to the next turn. Eventually, once we're in a good position, then we really talk about the hips and the center mass being in front of the feet, or the feet behind the center mass at the top of the turn. Those are where we would go to, but the hips over the feet seems to be where we saw quick improvement, but still a lot of work to be done. The other lesson learned was, as I said before, we're seeing the mechanics of a pole plant definitely being taught across the country, because I think most of the kids definitely knew how to pole plant. We saw good pole plants and brushes and stubbies. But pole planting, as soon as we put a tall gate in, a slalom gate in, pole plant went all the way to non-existent for the most part, even a pole tap. And I strongly recommend that we make this a priority, that we focus on skiing normal slalom and focus on just clear the gate, bring the hand down and plant that pole, or at least a tap in front of you. I think we need to develop some basic progressions for this inside the gates. Variable conditions and terrain. We saw good improvement quickly in the rolls, which was nice to see. And really looking to set in rolls and looking to set differently in rolls. Sometimes easy, sometimes really challenging, and just getting the opportunity to ski those different environments. Changes in pitch. The athletes seem to adapt pretty well to rolls or ruts, dishes. The ability to adapt to those dishes and ruts really comes down to fundamentals. If you come inside too early, you don't have that active weight transfer. Your hips not up over your foot. You can't get the ski to bend as the ski starts to travel down into the dish. The platform goes away from you, so you have to anticipate that to stay in balance over the ski. And fundamentally, if you're skiing pretty good on a smooth course when there's no dish, but you're still just a little bit inside, as soon as you get a little bit of dish, you're going to be affected way more. So I think the lessons learned are really on those 5 areas that we have far greater work to do there with all athletes, the top ones and our young developing athletes. The other thing we saw once again, is the aerobic base needed to handle this kind of skiing is not there. We saw the athletes get tired quickly. This was what we saw at Mammoth and Squaw, and I don't expect to see the physiological changes that are necessary to make that big base within a month. There's no way to do that. But we saw the same thing across the board of the new athletes that were at this camp. One thing that was interesting, though, was the 5 or 6 athletes that were at the Mammoth camp were able to handle the hood volume intensity focus in a better way. And I think this is a mental gain. They've physically or mentally have been able to prepare themselves better to handle that kind of volume or intensity. And that was a really good progression that I saw out of the athletes. So I do think that there's a mental component, but as a nation, we need to really focus on that A1, that conversational pace, aerobic base. It takes years to get that base, so we need to start working at it at a young age. Core strength, we did core training almost every day. Really, it was not hard workouts because it was more on the education side. I was impressed with the athletes' ability to learn neutral spine and really from one day to another keep those gains of learning. But neutral spine, and then also the concept of connecting, that they're moving through, everything is moving together through multiplanar strength exercises. And this was done through, throwing logs, rocks, med balls, and really using from your toes to your fingertips, all your muscles working connectively totally. We didn't do a lot of that, but we touched on it during the camp. I really think that in general, if there was 2 big areas to improve on across all of our conditioning is more aerobic base and a tremendous amount more core training from the ground, hanging, and standing.
Sorry, I just hit delete there. Thanks, Sasha. As we talk as a staff, sit back and think about what the value of this camp was and what we learned. Getting back to what I said at the beginning, this was a broad spectrum of frankly, our best development athletes in the country. 7 years of birth, men and women, 47 athletes. It was a really good sampling of what we have coming up the pipeline. And one of the reasons we do a camp like this is to try to impact change on a broader level, but also to try to expose athletes to what's possible. The young athletes benefit tremendously from skiing against athletes who are not just 1 or 2 years older than them, but in this case, U16s with FIS level athletes. There's also a challenge in there, though, as we found. The younger athletes don't quite have the conditioning level. They don't have the skill base. They're not quite able to keep up with the FIS level athletes. And then the other thing we notice that there's a big discrepancy among the top development team athletes and the top couple development athletes and the rest of the group in their sense of urgency, the way they go about their day, the way they get up on the hill and they approach the training with a purpose. There's been a as I go around the country, I hear a lot about how development takes time and we have to be patient with our athletes. There's no doubt that development takes time, but we have to approach each day with urgency, a sense of purpose. We have to maximize our opportunities on the hill, and speaking to coaches out in we have to instill that in our training environments that we set up and in the way we coach and motivate young athletes. We have 3 hours, I think, is a typical year of training for time on snow at task. it's a really limited amount of time when you consider the number of days and hours that athletes are in their ski equipment and riding the chairlift and whatnot. And we have to maximize what we're doing on the hill during that time. So the two big areas that we'd like to address and really the big take-home points in that sense of urgency are fundamental skills. We've talked a lot about these over the last hour, but a balanced athletic stance sounds simple, but it's hard to execute. Balanced athletic stance through the whole turn, outside ski to outside ski with an active weight transfer, upper body discipline, being able to separate the upper and lower body so that you can rotate the femur into the turn. Lower leg engagement, again, that femur rotation idea, and the ankle pronation. Strong position through the apex of the turn. Snow contact, didn't talk a lot about snow contact in this camp. I mean, it was obviously relevant to spine and through the rolls and the terrain, but that's a big fundamental skill. You saw it a little bit in the video that Marianne showed, where the athlete lost snow contact in the transition, and they had to redirect, and it took time to reestablish the arc. Maintaining snow contact is a critical skill. And as Sasha said very eloquently, pole plant, please, it's necessary. I mean, if we're going to have athletes that are going to succeed, especially in slalom at the World Cup level, they have got to be able to pole plant. It's a necessary skill. So we need to continue to stress that skill. And then secondly, more generally, on and off the hill, we've got to stress the general athletic development. One of the big areas, as Sasha stressed, is the A1, the base aerobic capacity. That's the ability to sustain training volume. Through the course of these days, we're 5 to 6 hours on the hill. It's a long time on the hill. It was quite warm. It was very taxing. And to be able to sustain that kind of a training day, day in, day out, we did 4-day blocks. It was 8 days on snow over a 9-day period. And then to turn around and keep training back home afterward and get ready for the next camp, that all takes baseline aerobic conditioning. And that's where we in testing, we've noticed that our younger athletes are way behind our national team athletes in terms of the wattage they're able to push on a bike at their A1 level of output. So those are the two areas that we continue to circle back on, and ones that we ask you club coaches to please help continue to stress in the environment. Basic fundamentals and athletic aerobic conditioning.
Going through the sense of urgency of working on fundamentals. I think part of, in this discussion is like I'm trying to create this sense of community around us that we're all in it together. And one of the hurdles is this concept of what's possible. And I think, if we're in our home club and we see the same athletes every day and you see them improve, we go, okay, they're doing good. But it's been brought to my attention that we lose touch of what is possible. And it was like I was brainstorming, how can we get everybody across the world to see what is possible? How can we see across the country what is possible? And of course, watching video and putting stuff out from education side is going to help. But I think there's 3 things that are essential. And I call them the cornerstones to fast skiing. And there are 3. One is pressure in the fall line. Is the center of mass being redirected from left to right, right to left, while the skis are in the fall line? Or is that pressure occurring after the fall line? We can look at any video, doesn't matter if it's a World Cup winning run or a U8, and we can see where that pressure is released relative to the fall line. So that's an area where we can always kind of seek to train our eye. What is possible? What could be faster? Direct path to the center of mass from top to bottom. Number 2, Often we look at clean skiing, but we forget that actually the center of mass, the distance it travels, is relative to the time. We have to be pushing our athletes and pushing what is possible to go more direct down the hill, down the hill. And of course, reducing drag. And that's clean skis and aerodynamics. Are we sliding? Are we pressuring while we're sliding? How far are we sliding? Those things we can look at. And then also looking at aerodynamics. Aerodynamics, the faster we go, the more important they are. But even in GS speeds, aerodynamic win. But at the base level of development, how clean are the skis? So if we're always looking at those three things first, and then kind of stepping back and saying, okay, where is it breaking down? Why are we not putting the pressure on the fall line? Why are we skiing rounder than maybe is possible? I think we can really challenge ourselves and to see the sense on a consistent basis, to find that sense of urgency, to really work on the fundamentals. Because what I see is most of the time when we don't have the pressure on the fall line or we don't have where we're skiing over around, it's a lack of fundamentals. So that's my challenge out to all of you, and to challenge back to me is saying what we can do together as a community to bring this sense of urgency up, that we have to get the fundamentals ingrained at a much younger age.
Continuing, and actually it's a little bit of a repetition of what we just talked for over an hour, is area of focus going forward. And that's going forward to the next camp, to the rest of the preparation season, and also into the race season. It's definitely what we would like to emphasize is that this does not stop with this camp, the focus, or the next camp, or with the starting of the race season. We feel that we have to, stress this over and over again, that even in the race season, you can go back to fundamentals and take a day or two and go back to emphasizing the athletic stance, going from outside ski to outside ski, to do the constraint courses and train, kind of break down the elements and train one or two elements at a time. So this is kind of the message going forward on a broader base. On a more specific things, we just went over and over this, and it's continue with athletic stance, continue with the upper lower body separation, and all those elements that we have said so many times. But most of us coaches who get on the snow get pushed by timing, get pushed by the next race. We forgot this about we want to do more of that. But to go back down to the fundamentals since the season, it really takes some courage to do it. But we definitely would like to support that idea as much as possible. Break it down to the fundamentals. Keep working on them. You're gonna go further in the long terms.
Thanks, Marian. Sasha, anything to add? While you're thinking, I'll just say from a U16 perspective, looking at this list, the top three are highly relevant to our U16 population as we see it. As we move down the list, it becomes a. But again, as we work with our athletes in the field, focusing on the simple balance, athletic stance through the turn, upper lower body separation, and a pole plant. Those three key skills, if we can start to ingrain those in our U16s, U14s, even younger level athletes, so that they're coming into the FIS ranks and we're able to start talking about establishing the platform, releasing the ski, and some of those more advanced concepts.
Well, the only thing I would add to that for the U16s is really going outside ski as well. I think that you look at the young skiers when they skied well, they were having that active weight transfer. And I think that's something you can teach at a very, very young age in your clubs. 6-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 3-year-olds. You see the kids that ski well, they have that active transfer. They can skate well. And you see it all the way up to the World Cup. Guys that skate well, the guys that have that active weight transfer, the ones that are faster. So I would just add that for the U16s. Just to bring in the precision of that hip. What we're in New Zealand, we'll really focus on that hip position, that high hip position coming in the turn. The hip or the feet are behind the hip. So it's almost like they're pushing behind them. That's going to be a big part of the project in New Zealand. For them to do that and adapting it to different turn radiuses. The only thing I would add.
Thanks, Sasha. Thanks, Marion. So this is exciting for me, and I hope it's informational for all of you to sit down and really dissect and discuss what we're doing with our development level athletes. As I mentioned a couple times, for a wide swath of development level athletes. One of our goals is to really start to encourage this conversation around fundamentals in our country. And start to develop athletes that have a more solid skill base as they come into the FIS ranks and a more elite level competition. So we've gone over an hour. Apologies for that, but do appreciate your time. I want to take a few minutes here while we have everyone on the line and answer any questions. If you'd just type them into the chat window, we'll do our best to address any of them.
I'm reading through all the video problem questions.
So I'll
read the question. I'll answer.
So Roger Kimball is asking, in general, how is the skiing IQ of the athletes? Their skiing vocabulary, language fluency, do they understand all these concepts?
I was actually impressed with the skiing IQ of the athletes, watching video with them, being able to pick up stuff. The one or two areas where we probably the terminology is confused is on this upper lower body separation, as we talked about most. But in general, like the skiing IQ of the athletes was their ability to take in concepts and quickly understand them was quite good.
I would say on the girls' side, there was a pretty big difference between the U16 or 2002 and the development goals of understanding and actually ability of execution of the exercises. It came even more to to light when we had difficult courses, like I mentioned before, with the rolls and the ruts and so forth. Then I could see right away that some athletes were not ready for that. But in understanding of the bigger picture of the camp and the goals, I think we got pretty close. We broke it down to the elements. Were pretty, easy to understand. What I think athletes did understand that we, in some capacities, didn't want to have them to execute everything to the perfect level, but they had to extract the most important things out of the different environments, and the task was also self-reflect onto what they have just done.
Thanks, Roger, for that question. We'll wait a few more minutes. If anyone has any further questions, just type them into that chat window.
We put him to sleep. Nice job, Mark.
I think it was the video.
We'll give it one more minute. Anyone has any questions, feel free. Now's your chance. All right. Seems like we've answered most of the questions going over an hour. Thanks again, everyone, for your time. Again, we will do these style webinars after each T-Team project. Sasha's going to New Zealand with about 12 guys and 2 additional staff. So 3 staff, 12 guys. They're going down at the end of July. Marion is going with a slightly smaller group, of 7 girls to Sasha middle of August. He's also got 2 club coaches going with him, so 3 staff. Sasha's group is going to look to cross over with other groups, other teams within the men's alpine team, and Marianne is going to be crossing over with the women's Europa Cup group. So great exposure opportunities for those athletes at both those projects, and we'll do probably do 2 webinars, one after each of those projects, to report back to the community what's been done. So thanks again, everyone, for your time. We'll talk to you all soon.